Henry Pryor joins us, property expert, as does George Monbiot, Guardian columnist. George, it sounds as if the government is in your line of thinking that you could take these oligarchs' homes and use them to house refugees.
Well, that is extraordinary, isn't it? And, you know, what an amazing tribute to the protesters. I think it's a perfect example of a demonstration in both senses of the word. They're demonstrating against the invasion of Ukraine, but they're also demonstrating the grotesque misallocation of property in this country, where we've got people from all over the world using what should be homes as investments and leaving them empty for a lot of the time.
So would you seize a lot of homes? Just before we go to our property expert, you might want to tell him how many of his customers' homes are going to be seized by you.
Well, I would like to change the tax system so that it's just not affordable to leave homes empty like this. I mean, in England alone...
Hang on, we're drifting here. The oligarchs can pay as much money as you want to charge them. They're not bothered about a new tax on their houses. They just want permission to live here, right?
No, if we're talking specifically about oligarchs, look, I mean, it's I definitely think it's a great idea to take these homes and use them to house Ukrainian refugees. That would be kind of fitting.
Well, Henry Pryor, why not do that? They're a very small category of person in this country.
Because, Jeremy, I think that it's important that we remember that our property laws are the envy of the world. They are used as a model for most democratic states when it comes to how property is transacted, and that we fiddle with those rules and those laws at our peril. There is much to be said, as George and indeed your previous speaker commented, about the effectiveness of the protest, which has very much drawn the eyes of not only the UK but also the world. And it is, as the Minister Michael Gove is trying to suggest, perhaps an interesting and illuminating, possibly slightly incendiary suggestion to start suggesting that we are going to just remove people's properties at will. The state can sequestrate property, and indeed we have a very efficient, if very underused tool through unexplained wealth orders, where people who we are suspicious of the funds that they've used to acquire these properties can be held to account. But the idea that we can set up Madame Guillotine on the corner of Belgrave Square and the lynch mob can decide what happens, who lives, who dies and who should have what, I'm afraid is not a world or a country that I want to visit.
I mean, Henry says our property laws are the envy of the world. That's total nonsense. Our property laws are notorious for enabling this country to be a haven for ill-gotten gains from all over the world. And for 6 years now, successive governments have been promising we're going to have a proper property register so we'll know who the real owners of property are. And again, they've been dodging that promise and allowing property in the UK to be used as a haven for criminal funds and all sorts of other dodgy money floating about the world. And as a result of that, we have now become the global capital for money laundering. We're the world's laundromat.
But there's quite a leap to go from that, which you may find that Henry even agrees with, to taking somebody's house. Because in the end, Abramovich, for example, who manages to own a home worth, I gather, £150 million next to Hyde Park, hasn't been convicted of anything in this country.
Well, I mean, the government, as Gove said, would have to do this legally. It has to navigate the law. And as he said, it would be a temporary use of the houses while sanctions apply, while these particular oligarchs are sanctioned. And I think he's right about that. You have to do it within the law. But generally, we need a massive change of policy and indeed a change in the law to ensure that housing is used to house people, but not just used as a massive, great international investment.
But on the oligarchs and the refugees, Henry, it's almost impossible to argue, isn't it, that if you take somebody like Abramovich, however he got his money, there's all kinds of documentaries coming on that, but he hasn't even found it in himself to condemn the war. So put refugees in his homes, because he sure isn't going to be in them. He's not even allowed in the UK.
Well, he isn't, and many of these people are discouraged from coming to the UK. But George is, once again, I'm afraid, mistaken. It's the fact that we have these laws that makes them so attractive to international criminals and money launderers, and it's not the laws that are wrong. It's the way that we deal with those who come here to abuse those laws. If we tear up the rules that allow people to have free enjoyment of their properties if they've popped up and paid for them properly, then there is a lot to be said for taking that away and housing refugees, if that's what you want to do with them. But it should be after due process.
But even in this very narrow example, Henry, of maybe a dozen sanctioned oligarchs, and they've got between them, I think, about 200 bedrooms, and you put, I don't know, 400 refugees from Ukraine in them. You wouldn't even do that.
I don't have an issue with the argument that people are quite rightly and very sensibly discussing. It's the principle of taking people's properties without due process. I don't mind if a democratic decision is made to do that. What I do object to is what Mr. Putin's doing, walking into another country and taking it at gunpoint. And I don't think that we would be living up to the laudable aims and aspirations and moral values that we have in this country if we were to follow him down that path.
Thank you very much, Henry Pryor, property expert, and George Monbiot, Guardian columnist.